So, have a confession to make. Some of you might know a little funny show called Whose Line Is It Anyway? And that's kind of where I got the idea for this. The original idea, though, was from my lovely wife, Melissa. She's an English teacher, and she's like, how about doing something with the difference between whose, the way you see it, and whose with the apostrophe? So that's when whose church is it anyway? And here we are. So why do you come to church? What are your expectations of church? And whose church is it really? Well, let's get started by seeing what the word means, the word church. It literally means assembly, congregation, or meeting. A similar term was used in the Old Testament, referring to experiences such as the day of assembly, the Lord's congregation, or meeting before the Lord. Now, the word translated church in the English Bible is ecclesia. And actually, as I know we have a few Spanish speakers here, the word church in Spanish is iglesia. Now, the word ecclesia is the Greek word kaleo, meaning to call, when with the prefix ek, meaning out. Thus, the word means the called out ones. Now, however, the actual English word church does not come from ecclesia, but from the word kuriakon, and I think I'm saying that right, which means dedicated to the Lord. So either way, you're either dedicated to the Lord or coming forth from the Lord. Now, in Ephesians 5:22, we read that the body, meaning our body, is the church, and the Christ is the head of the church. We also read in Revelation 21:3, it says, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them. They will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them and be their God." Let me ask you something. In biblical times, when somebody needed a boat made, what did the people in town say? "We know a guy." Of course, I don't think anybody here needs a boat made at the moment. I don't think that's why you came here this morning. So let's see, why do you come to church? I'm sure you each have your own very specific, very personal reasons why you do come to church, why you decided to start going to church, or why you decided to come back to church. I like to think that there's three general reasons why we might do that, and there may be more, but these are the three I'm sticking with. The first one is to be in fellowship. Now, by show of hands, who would like to say that they're here for fellowship? Beautiful, beautiful. The second one is to feel a better connection to your spirituality. Any takers? Beautiful. And the last one is somewhat similar, to learn to follow your spiritual guidance. Who would like to learn to follow your spiritual guidance? So let's start with the fellowship. Whether you consciously know it or not, you might want to experience a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and you may want to be around others that think like you in spiritual terms, so you can talk to them about spiritual things that you may not be able to with others, whether it be your job or any other situation. Now, of course, not everyone here is in, I'm going to call it the same exact place in their lives and in their spiritual growth, but as long as we have something in common, some belief in common, we can all work together, as the song says. We come together in the name of love, in the name of the Lord. Another thing I think about, as far as whether you're constantly thinking about being here for fellowship or not, some of us are introverts, like myself, and some of you may be extroverts. Either way, we have a reason why we want to be in community, even if it's just for a little bit or if you want something bigger. So either way, I think humans, as a rule, need to have some kind of community. There is a reason why we call a setting like this our spiritual family. I've heard it say, actually in this church and in a couple of other ones, that when they came to this church, what's the expression? They felt right at home. Show of hands, and you don't have to, but who felt right at home when they came in first time ever? Beautiful, beautiful. So what I'd like to follow with is, what are your expectations about being in fellowship? One of them might be actually to not feel alone. Some of us may not be so lucky to have family or good friends nearby, although I dare say some of us might not necessarily be too comfortable with family being too close. The expression "too close for comfort" comes to mind, of course. Or you may just simply want to be part of a community, to feel a sense of belonging. And yes, even to make friends that you can talk to and talk with about some of those spiritual things that you want to talk about. This fellowship might actually help you to deal with situations in the world. I know we come here and there's a place of safety, but because of the fact that we can communicate with anyone, basically anywhere around the world, and we have the internet and we have the TV, we can pretty much find out what's going on in big terms, of course, all around the world. So, especially times like right now, we have a couple of wars going, and it's either a country trying to overtake another one, or two different peoples going at each other because they see themselves as separate. And I like to say that we tend to do that no matter what, even us here. How many of you here, and you can be honest, feel grateful that these wars and these tensions are not happening here in the U.S.? I dare say that we should stop looking at it as them and us, because in truth, it is all of us. In truth, whatever is happening all the way in Russia, China, the Middle East, is happening to us. And if you don't believe me, just think about how it affects many of you just thinking about it. So yes, it does affect us, so it is happening to us. Another reason why we might want to be coming to church is, yes, to feel that a better connection with our spiritual self. By coming to church, you're saying to yourself that you want to experience the connection with the divine, with God, with the Christ, whatever you want to call it, to feel that oneness, that wholeness. As we read in Matthew 18:20, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them." What does that mean? It means that we can experience our connection, our Christ self, when we come together. And it also makes it easier for us to work on our spiritual growth and understanding. Therefore, not only do we get to experience that fellowship, but we get to connect to our divinity, which includes every single one of us. So what might the expectations be for that spiritual connection? As I touched on it already, the sense of belonging, that sense that you might be on the right track by coming to a church like ours to get that spiritual understanding, and even to realize that, yes, maybe you are supposed to be here. We are supposed to be here to connect with each other so that we can start manifesting that connection that we can go from this small church into the city, into the country, and into the world. And the good news is we really can do that already thanks to the internet. We may not be doing this live right now, but it is being recorded, and anybody can pick it up on YouTube and watch it anytime they want, and maybe watch it more than once, if they like what I'm saying. I can tell you for myself, after growing up Catholic, and as I became a young adult, I thought to myself, I'm not sure that I like this. That's not for me. It just didn't ring true for me. Granted, I am very grateful for the experience I had. And it took me a few years before I decided that I might want to come back to a spiritual home. And it took me having 2 young girls to make me think, I want to at least have them have the experience, even if it's a little bit similar to what I had growing up. Because I thought at that moment, it's good to have some kind of spiritual grounding for us to keep us going. Little did I know that I was looking for this church, not necessarily just for them, but for myself. I mean, look at me, I'm here now. It took a few years, but here I am. Thank you. Another reason you might come to church is to learn how to follow that spiritual guidance. Knowing that you can connect to your spirituality at church, you may be here to find out how to listen to that spiritual guidance and how to understand which one it is and which one it isn't. I can tell you a quick lesson, if you will, about whether you're listening to your inner voice or the ego. Just a simple thought is, if you're not arguing with yourself, you might be listening to your inner voice. Just trust that. And yes, what are your expectations of being here to follow your spiritual guidance? Well, you might think that by listening to me, you might get something, or any of the other ministers that we have coming through here, and even our very own licensed Unity teacher, Hank. Yes, you may learn something from us. But I can tell you that as I stand here and look at you, as I am speaking to you, I am learning for myself. So it's not just for me, it's for you. It's not the fact that we are just one, but it is that cycle that whatever I give, I receive, and vice versa. There is no way that we can be separate from each other, even though in this illusion of our human physicalness, we think that we are separate. And even science is starting to understand that there is no separation whatsoever. We are just different aspects of energy vibrating at different levels. That's all it is. So you may be here to try to get something, to try to understand something, to try to learn to listen to your inner voice. Or you know it. And I think most of us do, if not all of us. But we need a reminder. I think that's a good part of why we come here on Sundays, to get that reminder, that weekly reminder, that we can start from a fresher place, that we can start from a more positive place, so that we can get through the rest of our week, especially if you have to get on I-4. Now that we have an idea why we come to church, whose church is it anyway? Is it the minister's church? Is it the Board of Trustees' church? Is it the congregation's church? Well, let's take a look at each one of them. Is it the minister's church? After all, the minister is supposed to be the spiritual leader, so why not think that, the church is the minister's because he's the spiritual leader and we come here for spiritual food, if you will. Why not? You might think without the minister, there might not be a church. But I think you're all experiencing that right now, since we all lost the senior minister a few months ago. But thankfully, you have in your midst somebody like myself, Reverend Faith, even Reverend Kathy, and yes, Hank, helping us to keep the spiritual food going, if you will, to keep that spiritual nutrition going. So, yes, the minister is a spiritual leader, but does it really mean that it is the minister's church? Well, how about, is it the Board of Trustees' church? I mean, without the board, bless you, without the board, we wouldn't have the church running right now, because without the minister, the senior minister, they've been doing a great job. I was going to say something else. Keeping the church going. Because the board manages the grounds, the facility, and organizes the congregation from week to week. So, but doesn't mean that because the board is not the spiritual leader, it doesn't belong to them? Let's see, what about the congregation? Meaning you guys, or even the music team. I mean, without the music, I think a lot of this would seem a little flat. So it's good they keep us going. And we're, of course, lucky we got Eddie with us. So, absolutely. And yes, even though the congregation, as in general terms, you do not keep the church going, you don't know what's happening from week to week, throughout the week, to make this Sunday happen the way it does. But you get to experience that connection, that oneness, and you get to experience your divinity with the rest of us. And in truth, without the congregation, I don't think there would be a church, right? But does it still make it your church? You may be gathering by now that what we need to say is that the church is all of us. It belongs to all of us, the minister, the board, and yes, everyone here, congregation, musicians, the AV team back there. Without them, we couldn't make this happen either. I like to see the minister, the board, and the congregation as the Trinity of the church, because we cannot have one without the other, and without any one of those three, we could not have a church. So that's why I like to say that, in truth, the church is God's. And what does that mean? If God is every single one of us, and each one of us is an individuation of God, then yes, that church belongs to us. You have a church. You have a church. You have a church. We all have a church. Thank you.